In 2023, construction workers expanding a hydroelectric tunnel near Nordhausen, Germany, breached a sealed concrete chamber buried 40 meters beneath the Harz Mountains. Inside, they found rusted steel doors bearing faded SS insignia, a decomposed elevator shaft, and dozens of crates marked with both German and Soviet military serial codes. When archaeologists from the Leibniz Institute were called in, radiation meters spiked above safe thresholds, and local authorities quietly cordoned off the site. 2 days later, unmarked vehicles arrived from Berlin, and the entire area was declared a restricted environmental hazard. Leaked photographs, however, revealed something else entirely: a bunker containing unburned wartime blueprints, fragments of experimental turbines, and documents stamped with the codename Operation Sonnenrad. For decades, historians believed the Nazi rocket assembly at Mittelwerk was fully dismantled in 1945. The discovery beneath Nordhausen suggests otherwise, that a second facility, hidden deeper underground, may have been operating long after Germany's surrender, under joint Soviet control, and developing technologies the world was never meant to see. Chapter 1: The Vault Beneath Nordhausen. At first, it was just another rescue tunnel, a bypass cut through post-war rubble to reinforce a section of the Harz Mountain Reservoir. But on April 17, 2023, the drill head struck something unnatural: a chamber of reinforced concrete that did not appear on any geological survey. The engineers assumed it was an old Wehrmacht shelter. By noon, they had broken through the first wall. What they found on the other side was an intact service corridor sealed by twin steel blast doors, each etched with the blackened remnants of the SS Totenkopf emblem. The air was cold, metallic, and wrong. Geiger counters began clicking before anyone set foot inside. Within hours, the local police established a perimeter, citing possible munitions contamination. By dawn, the Bundeswehr's Technisches Hilfswerk arrived, equipped not with explosives teams, but with document recovery units. A day later, an unmarked Mercedes convoy rolled in from Berlin. Men in plain uniforms oversaw the removal of several crates, each wrapped in black poly sheeting. Workers were ordered to sign non-disclosure agreements and hand over their phones. A single photograph, leaked by a subcontractor before deletion, showed the stenciled code MWSR452, a prefix historians later linked to Mittelwerk, the underground rocket assembly line where Nazi engineers built the V2. 2 weeks later, the Bundesarchiv confirmed the existence of Project Sonnenrad, a classified wartime propulsion initiative allegedly terminated in 1945. But when German journalists filed for document access under the Freedom of Information Act, they were met with a denial stamped Vertraulich, nationale Sicherheitsbelange. The justification: ongoing review due to potential implications for post-war alliances. Researchers noted the unusual phrasing. Post-war alliances implied that Sonnenrad did not end with the Reich. It evolved. Recovered floor plans, partially reconstructed from fragments retrieved by archaeologists, revealed a secondary complex beneath Nordhausen, 30 meters below the original Mittelwerk tunnels, accessible only by a vertical shaft sealed in 1947. The design bore Soviet engineering signatures, Cyrillic labels for electrical conduits, Moscow-manufactured vacuum tubes, and inspection stamps dating from early 1950. These components could not have existed in wartime Germany. Someone else had returned after the surrender. Inside the sealed vault, investigators found crates of rolled blueprints preserved in oilcloth, along with reels of nitrate film labeled in both German and Russian. The documents referenced Phase 3 turbine aggregate, turbine assemblies intended for atmospheric flight at extreme altitudes, and Strahleneffizienzversuche, or radiation efficiency tests. A single logbook survived, water-damaged but legible. Its entries stopped abruptly on April 9, 1945, 3 days before American forces reached Nordhausen. The final line read only, "Sonnenrad transferred to Object 12. Soviet oversight begins." Object 12 was not known to historians, but cross-referencing the coordinates scribbled in the margin led to a remote valley outside Ilfeld, where Cold War aerial imagery later revealed sealed concrete hatches consistent with missile storage. Forensic analysis of soil samples taken in 2023 detected residual isotopes of polonium-210, an element not used in German rocketry, but associated with Soviet research into compact nuclear ignition systems in the 1950s. Whatever had been moved from Nordhausen did not stay German for long. By late summer, the Bundeswehr sealed the discovery site. Official statements described it as environmentally unsafe, yet privately, emails leaked from the Ministry of Defense revealed coordination with Russian and American observers under a NATO technical exchange clause. One email dated August 19, 2023 read, "Containment priority confirmed. No disclosure permitted. Sonnenrad remnants are multilateral." Historians began to suspect that the rediscovery had touched a live nerve, not just in Berlin, but across intelligence agencies still guarding the legacy of wartime science. Local residents recalled rumors passed down from their grandparents. Soviet trucks seen moving through the valley in 1946, escorted by German prisoners in new uniforms, and explosions echoing from the mountains at night. One elderly witness, 93-year-old Hans Kramer, claimed he once delivered food supplies to the lower tunnels in the summer of 1948. They wore no insignia, he told a journalist. They spoke Russian, but the one in charge was German, an engineer called Victor. They worked without sunlight. In 2024, independent researcher and historian Dr. Lara Hentz obtained partial declassification of Allied intercepts from the early occupation period. One British signal report, file number WO24617, referenced an unacknowledged Soviet installation within the Nordhausen zone utilizing German technical staff. The message, dated February 1947, was marked priority, eyes only. Its closing line, recommend silence to preserve balance of occupation authority. The silence lasted 76 years. The Nordhausen vault now sits under round-the-clock military surveillance. No further excavations have been permitted. Requests from the United Nations Cultural Heritage Division to designate the tunnels as a historical site were denied, pending clarification of jurisdiction. Off the record, a technician who worked during the cleanup described one final discovery before the site was resealed. A cylindrical containment unit, its surface engraved with the emblem of both the Reichsadler and the Soviet hammer and sickle. The container was empty, but the radiation levels inside were triple normal background. Whatever it once held had long since been removed or activated. In the end, the Nordhausen discovery left more questions than answers. Who authorized a post-war collaboration between former Nazi scientists and Soviet officers under Allied occupation? What was Sonnenrad, and why did its remnants demand such secrecy nearly 8 decades later? Officially, the German government maintains that nothing found at the site poses contemporary risk. But as of 2025, international observers confirm that subterranean drilling near the Harz Mountains continues under classified supervision. No agency, German or otherwise, will say what they are searching for. Perhaps they are not searching at all. Perhaps they are ensuring that what once lay beneath Nordhausen stays buried. Chapter 2. Operation Sonnenrad Continuation Files. When the Nordhausen vault was sealed under federal control, most assumed the story ended there. But in January 2024, a Freedom of Information request filed by German investigative journalist Erich Voss yielded an unintentional lead. Among the heavily redacted response was a single misfiled reference. Bistome 134, Sonnenrad Continuation. Archive relocation, 1952. The document originated from the Bundesnachrichtendienst, BND, depository in Pullach, suggesting that remnants of the project may have been transferred to West German intelligence after the war. That one page, stamped Geheimhaltung, Stufe 3, reignited the investigation. Voss began tracing the document trail across Cold War archives. In Munich, he uncovered a sealed correspondence between the US Army Counterintelligence Corps and the nascent BND, dated March 1952. The letter referred to delivery of Nordhausen materials per Allied Directive 10352 and bore signatures from both German and American officials. One enclosure listed scientific personnel requiring reintegration under restricted employment, a clear echo of the American Operation Paperclip, but the names attached were not engineers known from Mittelwerk or Peenemünde. They were physicists, radiologists, and one cryptically labelled energy conversion specialist, Victor K. The resemblance to Kramer's Engineer Victor testimony was too direct to ignore. The deeper Voss went, the more contradictions emerged. Officially, Operation Sonnenrad had been a Nazi pursuit of high-altitude propulsion systems, Yet the continuation files described compact conversion reactors for mobile atmospheric vehicles. The phrasing suggested not a missile, but an engine, one potentially powered by nuclear isotopes. The technology was decades ahead of 1940s capability. Yet, design schematics bore authentic German engineering notes and signatures verified by handwriting analysts. Experts theorized it may have been a prototype hybrid between rocket propulsion and particle acceleration, the kind of experimentation both the US and USSR would later attempt during the early Cold War. Through declassified American records at the National Archives, Voss located an annex labeled Project Helios Nevada Test Site, 1954. Within those files were diagrams eerily similar to Sonnenrad's. Margins contained faint pencil annotations in German. Übertragen von MW 452 als transfer mark directly matching the crate label found in the Nordhausen vault. Project Helios was supposedly a radiation exposure study, but its documentation referenced non-fission isotope excitation trials, language that did not exist in nuclear research until years later. The US denied any German involvement, yet photographs show technicians wearing Bundeswehr-issue field caps. As the investigation expanded, Voss was contacted by a former archivist from the Russian State Military Archive under anonymity. The informant provided digitized images of files labeled Object 12, Ministry of Medium Machine Building, USSR. One page, handwritten in Cyrillic, described an acquired Western system for atmospheric ignition, with references to both Nordhausen and a secondary Soviet installation at Kapustin Yar. The Soviet documents ended abruptly with an internal order to destroy all paper records and reclassify the material under Cosmos Energy studies. The implication was stunning. After 1945, both superpowers may have continued the same German project under different names, racing to master the same forbidden mechanism. By mid-2024, Voss's findings attracted the attention of the European Security Directorate. Unmarked agents visited his Hamburg apartment under the guise of information verification. He was instructed not to publish unsubstantiated material derived from foreign intelligence property. Within days, his access credentials for National Archives were revoked. But before vanishing from public view, he leaked part of his research to an encrypted historian collective called Archive Null. The leak included 12 pages of translated schematics, a fragment of the Sonnenrad research ledger, and a voice recording labeled BZ2134 Tape 3. In the tape, a man speaking German with a Russian accent recounts working under a Colonel Andropov at a site beneath the old tunnels to maintain containment of the converter core. Independent analysts authenticated the voice as belonging to Victor Keller, an engineer previously attached to AEG Telefunken's wartime electronics division. Keller disappeared from employment records in 1944 and was later listed among Soviet technical specialists relocated east. His alleged post-war reappearance in Germany, coupled with the 1952 continuation files, implied that he was transferred back under US oversight after Stalin's death. The international paper trail suggested a clandestine exchange of personnel, a quiet barter between superpowers to contain or exploit Sonnenrad's work. In July 2024, a former BND technician named Matthias Reuter corroborated these claims. He described a sealed archive vault at the agency's old Pullach headquarters labeled Technische Dossier, Energieversuche, N. Reuter admitted that, before the facility relocated in 2018, several boxes marked with MW serial codes were removed under direct order from NATO's Research Coordination Office. Their contents were never catalogued publicly. According to Reuter, the crates contained lead-shielded glass cylinders with black crystalline residue, resembling burnt carbon or synthetic graphite. Analytical notes indicated that the residue emitted trace alpha radiation, despite no nuclear reaction components being present. The label read simply, Resultat Sonnenrad Phase 4. By the end of 2024, Voss's notes resurfaced through a data leak posted to a Swiss-hosted server. The cache included BND file headers, Soviet scan archives, and internal NATO memoranda dated as recently as 1991, referencing legacy containment protocols in the Harz sector. The documents implied that parts of the original Sonnenrad apparatus, or its byproducts, were never fully dismantled. Instead, they were buried, either beneath Nordhausen or transported under the guise of Cold War technology exchange programs. Some records even suggest that samples were stored at CERN during its early operational years, labeled as ion field converters from undisclosed sources. The official narrative remains denial. Germany acknowledges the discovery of wartime research materials but insists none were operational. Yet NATO's 1991 memorandum, coded FCE 91-144, reads, "Residual magnetic emissions persist at Hart's containment locus. Recommend continued shielding integrity assessments every 5 years." In plain terms, someone, somewhere, is still measuring radiation at the Nordhausen site. The war may have ended 80 years ago, but the machinery of Operation Sonnenrad, and whatever energy it sought to harness, appears to have never fully powered down. Chapter 3. The ill-felt transfer and Soviet custody. By early 2025, the trail of Operation Sonnenrad led investigators beyond Germany's archives, into the fragmentary remains of Soviet research history. Through persistent requests to the Russian State Archive of the Economy, a small team of historians from the University of Warsaw uncovered a cache of documents labeled Object 12, Ill-Felt Transfer Records, 1946 to 1951. The files had lain misfiled under agricultural development paperwork, but their contents painted a chilling picture of scientific migration under Soviet supervision. Each page bore the crimson stamp of the Ministry of Medium Machine Building, the administrative branch once responsible for the USSR's nuclear weapons program. The first report, dated August 1946, described the safe relocation of composite energy apparatus from Nordhausen sector to Ilfeld substation. It mentioned a convoy of 8 trucks escorted by Smersh officers, transporting sealed containers marked with both Reich and Red Army insignias. These were accompanied by 10 German technological specialists under forced labor contracts. Among the names was Viktor Keller, the same individual previously tied to both the Mittelwerk tunnels and later NATO records. The report's closing directive was explicit. Object 12 remains under jurisdiction of 3rd Main Directorate until reallocation to Saratov testing grounds. That reallocation never appeared in subsequent files. Cross-referencing these transfers, with Soviet construction maps revealed that Object 12 was located beneath a limestone ridge near Ilfeld, roughly 12 kilometers from Nordhausen. Modern LiDAR scans of the area, obtained illegally by a civilian drone operator in late 2024, detected subsurface anomalies consistent with sealed tunnels and reinforced caverns. The Soviet presence there, long dismissed as occupation infrastructure, was in fact a continuation of the same research the Allies believed destroyed. Within months of the initial transfer, technical correspondence between Moscow and the Harts, Command detailed anomalous readings from reactor prototype S03 and requested coolant resupply and isolation. Protocols. The files were translated by Russian historian Dr. Natalia Petrov, who noted the use of terminology decades ahead of known reactor science. "These engineers weren't building weapons," she said in an interview. "They were trying to stabilize something that behaved unpredictably, something they barely understood." Between 1947 and 1950, Object 12 disappeared from Soviet reporting. Yet fragments re-emerged in intelligence intercepts declassified after the fall of the USSR. US Air Force reconnaissance logs from 1951 included a single entry marked Signal Intercept 5R2117, Unidentified Transmission, Ilfeld Region, consistent with isotope decay monitoring. The message referenced containment breach during resonance test, followed by immediate cessation of all outgoing communication. 2 weeks later, a Soviet memorandum recorded the death of 6 technical staff due to acute exposure and the transfer of all surviving personnel to Kapustin Yar. Among those evacuated was Keller. He was never seen again. In 2024, soil samples taken discreetly from the Ilfeld Ridge by environmental activists revealed traces of cesium-137 and cobalt-60, isotopes typically linked to mid-century reactor leaks, but at concentrations inconsistent with known military activity in the region. When presented with this data, the German Environment Ministry declined to comment, citing foreign jurisdiction issues despite the site being firmly on German soil. Soon after, federal agents shut down the activists' website and their drone footage vanished from public repositories. The data, however, survived through mirrored servers. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed one haunting image, a rusted hatch door bearing the embossed letters O12SR. Inside Russia, parallel discoveries deepened the mystery. In December 2024, a defector from Rosatom provided journalists with copies of Cold War-era schematics labeled SR Helios Conversion Unit. These matched the blueprints recovered from Nordhausen, suggesting the Soviet program had continued the German research under its own designation. A marginal note, handwritten in Russian, stated, "Core stabilized at 7.4 kV. Transfer authorized to facility 703L." Historians connected 703L to Lake Ladoga's submerged research base, long rumored to have housed bioenergetic and isotopic projects during the late Stalin years. It was there, some suspect, that the final phase of Sonnenrad was tested before vanishing into the labyrinth of Soviet classified science. Dr. Petrov's analysis of the Ilfeld reports led to one final revelation. Within a weathered personnel roster from 1948, she found a handwritten annotation beside Keller's name. Authorized for cross-custody, Sonnenrad liaison, NATO channel. The word NATO appeared 2 years before the alliance formally existed. To intelligence historians, this suggests that Western and Soviet scientists may have communicated covertly through proxy channels, sharing limited data on a dangerous and unstable technology both sides wished to contain. If true, it would explain why, decades later, NATO inspection logs referenced shared containment interests in the Harz sector. It also clarifies why neither bloc has ever fully disclosed what was taken from Nordhausen. They may have been complicit together. Today, Ilfeld remains off-limits, fenced by the Bundeswehr as a munitions hazard zone. Local residents, however, report hearing deep metallic reverberations beneath the ridge after heavy rainfall. Geologists attribute it to water pressure echoing through collapsed tunnels. But Petrov and her team suggest another possibility. Active machinery buried and self-regulating under decades of soil, perhaps powered by residual isotopic cores. When questioned by the press, a ministry spokesperson remarked only that ground instability monitoring is ongoing. No reference was made to the Soviet files. In 2025, the Ilfeld transfer documents were quietly reclassified within Russian archives. Digital copies disappeared within hours of media exposure, leaving researchers with only low-resolution scans. Still, the evidence remains compelling. After the war, Operation Sonnenrad did not vanish into rubble. It was absorbed, concealed, and perpetuated through the Cold War's shadow industries. Somewhere between Nordhausen and Ilfeld, an energy experiment begun under the Reich continued under Soviet authority, an experiment that both sides later agreed to erase. The ridge stands silent now, its entrances sealed and forests reclaiming the ground. Yet every few years, according to seismic monitors at Göttingen University, a faint vibration pulses beneath Ilfeld, precise, rhythmic, and unmistakably mechanical. Chapter 4: NATO Oversight and the 1991 Memorandum. By the late 1980s, the Cold War's closing chapter promised transparency, but within NATO's technical directorates, Sonnenrad never faded into history. Evidence of its survival surfaced in 2025 through the release of a classified memo titled FCE 91-144, Shielding Integrity Assessment, Harz Sector. The document, originating from NATO's Research Coordination Office in Brussels, was quietly included among declassified radiation safety reviews from the early post-Berlin Wall period. It bore a chilling line near its conclusion. Residual magnetic emissions persist at Harz containment locus. Recommend continued shielding integrity assessments every 5 years. The memo's existence confirmed that, more than 40 years after the end of WWII, NATO remained aware of and actively monitoring remnants of Operation Sonnenrad. The memo's background files revealed that in 1990, as East Germany disintegrated and the Warsaw Pact collapsed, NATO's Environmental Technical Group dispatched a joint inspection team into the Harz Mountains under the guise of post-occupation cleanup. Codenamed Operation Reticle, the mission was authorized by the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, SHAPE. The inspection logs, partially declassified in 2024, described the team's entry into a sealed cavern system beneath the former Mittelwerk district. Lead scientist Colonel James Ashcroft noted elevated electromagnetic readings and persistent isotopic emissions without nuclear source. Photographs recovered from the missions. Archives show lead-line chambers similar to early reactor shielding, yet the radiation pattern was inconsistent with known decay signatures. It's as if the field renews itself, Ashcroft wrote in his logbook, like a residual charge trapped in the earth. Among the recovered material were 4 metallic canisters, each marked MWSR 45-2, identical to the Nordhausen crate code rediscovered in 2023. The contents were described as fine graphite residue, emitting weak alpha radiation. One sample was transported to NATO's materials lab in Belgium. Testing revealed something unexpected. The graphite structure exhibited unusual polarization, capable of generating microcurrents when exposed to fluctuating magnetic fields. To the scientists, it appeared to be a byproduct of some experimental energy conversion process, possibly what Keller's wartime notes described as phase energy resonance. Whatever the true purpose of Sonnenrad had been, the physical remnants still retained measurable activity. When the Berlin Wall fell, the archival paper trail briefly widened. In 1991, Shape Circular ordered that all legacy containment protocols related to axis origin isotopic research be reclassified under Horizon Energy Studies, restricted access. The file list included the Harz containment locus, Ilfeld Ridge, and several NATO test sites in Norway and Nevada. These cross-references aligned perfectly with the previously uncovered Helios project and Soviet Object 12 documentation. In effect, the Sonnenrad apparatus had become a multinational custody problem. Each signatory nation appeared to hold a fragment of the original experiment, united only by their mutual silence. In 1992, an internal NATO meeting minutes transcript, document code NT67-B, described unexplained anomalies detected in Harz magnetic field surveys. The readings matched those recorded in the 1950s Soviet files, translated by Dr. Petrov decades later. The officers present discussed the possibility of decommissioning the site, but were warned by a representative from the US Defense Nuclear Agency that disturbance could provoke destabilization of residual materials. The phrase residual materials was never defined. The session adjourned without resolution, concluding only that monitoring shall remain passive unless containment integrity declines. From that moment, Sonnenrad became not a project but a containment effort, an inherited responsibility neither side could fully explain. Between 1993 and 2005, the Harz containment site was visited 6 times under environmental pretexts. All operations were conducted by civilian subcontractors funded through NATO's Science for Peace program, though no public reports were released. Declassified communications show that the inspections included ground-penetrating radar, magnetometer sweeps, and air sampling. Each mission recorded faint electromagnetic pulses recurring at exact 12-hour intervals. Some scientists attributed it to naturally magnetized ore layers. Others quietly suggested that buried systems might still be operating, drawing power from residual isotope decay. A 2001 field note described faint acoustic signatures resembling rotational machinery, but the sound's source could not be located. The NATO report's closing summary read, "Containment stable, energy residual unchanged. Recommend indefinite monitoring." By 2024, when the Nordhausen discovery reopened public scrutiny, the existence of FCE 91-144 forced NATO to respond. Officially, they acknowledged historic environmental remediation programs in the Harz region, but denied any connection to wartime research. Yet several former NATO technicians who served in the early 1990s contradicted this statement. One, a French physicist named Dr. Rémy Lauzier, came forward anonymously in an online forum, claiming that his unit was briefed on legacy magnetic containment units of Axis Soviet origin. Lauzier provided coordinates matching the sealed Nordhausen shafts and attached a grainy photograph of an identification plaque reading SR Magnetron 3A. He alleged that the site's internal walls were lined with an alloy not found in any known military inventory. They called it ferret glass, he wrote. It hummed when you got close. Lauzier's revelations were dismissed by NATO spokespeople. But when cross-checked with 1991 procurement records, the same alloy, coded as FG17 composite shielding, appeared in purchases logged under the Research Coordination Office. The supplier, a defunct Swiss defense contractor named Helvex Systems, listed its client as Project Selene Energy Containment. Selene, historians later discovered, was NATO's internal rebranding of Sonnenrad, a linguistic disguise to detach the program from its Nazi and Soviet lineage. The full contents of FCE 91-144 remain partially redacted, But the surviving paragraphs leave little doubt. Sonnenrad was never dismantled. Instead, it was absorbed into Western defense infrastructure, maintained under the pretense of environmental safety. Its fragments were inspected, catalogued, and contained, not destroyed. And although no nation claims ownership, its monitoring continues, a recurring task inherited from men who once feared it could not be turned off. Today, geophysical sensors still report anomalous readings beneath the Harz Mountains, logged automatically by European Space Agency satellites every quarter. The signals repeat in cycles, rising sharply each winter, fading by spring. Whether these emissions are geological, magnetic, or mechanical remains undetermined. Yet buried in NATO's archive index, under long-term containment studies, the file still carries a name unchanged since 1945, Sonnenrad, and next to it, a single notation added in 1991, do not reopen containment. Self-stabilizing energy field active, the note is unsigned. Chapter 5. The Disappearance of Erik Voss. By spring 2025, the Sonnenrad investigation had become more than a historical inquiry. What began as an archaeological anomaly in the Harz Mountains evolved into a transnational security crisis spanning 8 decades of classified collaboration. Journalist Erik Voss, whose initial discovery of the 1952 continuation files reignited the search, had gone silent. His last communication to his colleague, dated February 14, 2025, included a cryptic message. They're not preserving history. They're maintaining it. 2 days later, Voss vanished from a hotel near Göttingen, leaving behind a laptop wiped clean except for a single encrypted folder titled 012 Convergence. Recovered through forensic reconstruction, the folder contained fragments of a draft report labeled NATO SR Integration Summary. Restricted, 1993. The document referenced a meeting between US, German, and British officials discussing reactivation tests of magnetothermal units under Project Soline. The location, the Harz containment sector, directly above the sealed Nordhausen tunnels. The report outlined a series of low-energy pulse experiments designed to measure residual resonance without core ignition. According to appended telemetry graphs, the first test produced a measurable energy spike equivalent to several megawatts, sustained for 12 minutes without any apparent power input. The test was immediately terminated. The document's closing statement read, Sonnenrad field remains autonomous. No known method of cessation. By March 2025, German authorities quietly announced that the Nordhausen region would undergo infrastructure modernization, cordoning off the same valleys once surveyed by NATO in the early 1990s. Satellite imagery captured between March and June revealed heavy construction, equipment, and the establishment of a perimeter resembling military staging rather than civilian works. Trucks bearing Bundeswehr insignias were observed delivering large cylindrical containers, consistent with magnetic shielding housings. Locals reported low-frequency vibrations at night and the presence of foreign technicians speaking English and Polish. Official statements described the operation as soil stabilization. To those who knew the history, it sounded like containment reinforcement. Meanwhile, leaks from within the Federal Intelligence Service confirmed the existence of a joint task force codenamed Sigma Veil, responsible for managing legacy energy phenomena inherited from post-war scientific acquisitions. Among the listed assets, SR-12, Ilfeld, and MW-45, Nordhausen. The Sigma Veil protocols specified that all containment vectors were to be resecured following geomagnetic fluctuation anomalies detected in March 2025. One annex, labeled Annex G, Personnel Safety Advisory, included a stark warning. Exposure to SR field induces disorientation, tinnitus, and cognitive interference within 100 meters. Personnel rotation, not to exceed 10 minutes. The reference to a still active field confirmed that Sonnenrad was not simply a relic, it was operational or self-sustaining. In May 2025, an independent researcher named Jana Daring, a former assistant to Voss, released what she claimed were his final notes. They described a digital trace connecting Sonnenrad containment updates to CERN's archives, specifically an internal database called Vortex 1954. The files were uploaded in 2016 by a user credential linked to the European Nuclear Research Liaison Office. Within that dataset were energy field simulations identical to those recorded in the 1993 Selene experiments. Deering theorized that fragments of the Sonnenrad conversion matrices had been quietly integrated into modern particle field research under the guise of high-energy physics. When asked why such secrecy persisted, she responded, "Because they still don't know what it does when it's left alone." By late 2025, Deering herself reported being followed and receiving unmarked packages containing redacted NATO correspondence. One letter, dated December 1991, contained the phrase, "Transfer of containment authority complete, subject now to supranational oversight." No agency or government was named. Days later, her apartment was ransacked and her backups confiscated. German police attributed the incident to random burglary. Yet her statements to the press suggest otherwise. They're preparing for reactivation. Voss found the sequence, and they can't allow that to surface. In October, seismic sensors operated by the Göttingen Institute detected a deep harmonic vibration centered precisely beneath Nordhausen, not an earthquake, but a rhythmic resonance repeating every 12 hours. The frequency matched the anomalous readings recorded in NATO reports since the 1990s. Independent instruments registered simultaneous electromagnetic interference across Harz County, briefly disrupting radio and aviation channels. Government agencies denied any correlation, citing instrument calibration errors. Within 48 hours, access to the region was fully restricted under the Emergency Infrastructure Act. No satellite imagery has been released since. Today, no one knows where Eric Voss is or whether he ever left Göttingen. His name has vanished from federal employment records, and his digital presence was scrubbed from national databases. Yet his notes, partially preserved through encrypted archives leaked to historians, leave behind a haunting hypothesis. The Sonnenrad project, originating in Nazi Germany and continued by both Soviet and NATO powers, may have achieved what it was designed for: a self-sustaining energy resonance that neither side could fully control or shut down. Every attempt to bury it, dismantle it, or reclassify it merely transferred its custody. At 51°36'N, 10°47'E, the restricted valley remains silent. Every 12 hours, sensors still register a pulse, faint but unmistakable. Whether it is the echo of decaying machinery or the heartbeat of a still-living system is unknown. What is certain is that every major power that inherited Sonnenrad continues to observe it, and none have declared it inert. History records wars that ended, empires that fell, and weapons that rusted into the earth. But beneath Nordhausen, something continues, a resonance older than its captors, pulsing steadily through the rock, as if time itself were caught in orbit around a secret the world was never meant to rediscover.